Hey guys, MetalJesus here, and today I want to do a video where I rank all of my clone consoles. Now, a couple things here. First of all, I don't own all of them that are on the market, but I do have a lot of the heavy hitters, like the systems from Analogue, as well as Hyperkin, and a few others. The other thing I want to mention is that I'm not going to include the first-party mini consoles that came out a couple years ago. I'm primarily focusing on the third-party systems that take actual physical media. And then the final thing I want to mention is that a couple of these are prototypes, kind of unreleased systems so far. It's because I got a couple of them for review and I use them all the time in my game room, and so I feel like they need to be included. All right guys, this is gonna be awesome. Let's take a look. I'm going to start with my least favorite clone console, one that just almost got there. That, of course, is the Hyperkin RetroN Sq. And this is an all-in-one clone system that is designed to play all of your Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games and output them to your HD TV. And I have to say, I do really like the idea and also the design of this console. I was looking forward to it when it was announced, and when I got a review unit, I was very pleasantly surprised by just how good it looks. I actually think this is a pretty nice looking Hyperkin console. Now, the problem with this one is that initially when I reviewed it, there were some things about it that I didn't necessarily like. One of them is that the video quality wasn't very good. It was a little bit softer than I expected it to be. Also, there was issues with the aspect ratio. And then finally, the support for the Game Boy Advance was just not there. It was very poor. Now, since those reviews have come out, Hyperkin has released a day one firmware update that addresses the sharpness. So now the pixels are much cleaner, as well as the aspect ratio looks a lot better. However, the Game Boy Advance support was still being worked on, and this is where it gets a little bit interesting, because as of the making of this video, I got an email from Hyperkin saying that there is a new firmware coming that I could beta test and basically see what the Game Boy Advance support would be, because when this thing shipped, it was terrible. And actually, they're getting much closer. So you'll see here that Iridian 3D actually runs really well, as does Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3. I was playing this for a while, and yeah, it's looking and running a lot better, although it does take forever for this game to load. Some of these Game Boy Advance games can take over a minute to load, which is not great. And then I popped in a copy of Motor Racer Advance, which was a game that just ran terribly on the system when it first launched. And it gets into the game and it tries to start, but then it reboots. So clearly this firmware is a work in progress. There's still some testing to be done, but they've told me that it should be out in a couple weeks, as well as they're going to release the source code and probably lean on the gaming community to maybe polish it up or add features. And so it's great that they continue to work and support this console, but because it was released in such a unfinished state, well, that's why it's the lowest on my list. Next up is another Hyperkin product. This one is the RetroN 77, which is designed to play all of your classic Atari 2600 games. And so this console fares much better in my list because right out of the gate, it supports 99% of all the Atari 2600 cartridges that you would want to play right out of the box. And it has a bunch of switches and options built onto the device itself to emulate what you would get with a real Atari 2600, because remember, this was a really early, gaming console, and so most of the menu options that you would use on a real Atari are actually done with physical switches. So they emulated a lot of those here really well. Plus you have the ability to do save states, you can do glitching, things like that. And I love the way it looks. They captured that 1970s wood grain look of the original so well without actually copying it. They made it their own. And I mentioned how the community sometimes comes together and can make custom firmware to make these even better. Well, the community has done that with the RetroN 77. So initially when this came out, there was a limitation of how many ROMs that you could have built into it. The community has come together and actually opened that up. And so now you can install hundreds, if not thousands of ROMs on here, which is very convenient and it works really well. And there's been some firmware updates to support more of the Atari peripherals and accessories. So this is actually a really rock solid Atari 2600 clone system. I think the only thing that I'm not crazy about is the joystick. It's fine, but it's a little creaky for my taste, and so I still like to use the original. But other than that, it's a nice system. And now we're going to get to something controversial, because people are going to be pissed that this clone system is so low on my list, but I feel like I'm justified. So this is the Analogue NT Mini. This is a system that is designed to be a clone system of your original NES or Famicom. So first, let's talk about what's good about this. So right off the bat, I love the way it looks. I love its design. Also, it's a solid piece of aluminum. It feels really substantial in your hand. And that's good because this is not a cheap clone system. It's very expensive to buy, even new and even on the secondary market. And this thing does an awful lot. I mean, more than most clone systems, especially if you look at the back there, because not only will it do HDMI up to 1080p, but it also has an analog video out. So it'll do RGB, component, S-video, and composite. So yes, you can use this on a modern HD television, or you can get all the benefits and the power of it, and you can connect it to an old school CRT if you wish. It's also region free, so you can play games from around the world, and more importantly, it supports 60 Hertz and also PAL's 50 Hertz. And the audio is impressive as well, because you can get digital audio over the HDMI, or if you prefer analog, well, you can do that too. And it's even got a plug-in right there to use the Famicom microphone. And because it's using FPGA to do all this emulation or recreation of the original hardware, it's basically lag-free. So you're probably wondering, why is it so low on the list? Because in many ways it fails at the one task that it's supposed to do, and that is play your physical cartridges. And so you see the problem here. I have my Super Mario Bros. 3 cartridge in there, and there's just a ton of give back and forth. It sways, and it has a hard time reading the cartridges. Not just this cartridge, but a lot of my cartridges. And it's not the cartridge's problem. I can put this in a real NES, I can put it in other systems, and it reads just fine. But there's so much play here with the slot that you put the cartridges in and the way the pins grab onto it. It's just bad design. And so this is just a real shame and disappointment. I posted about it in the Analogue Facebook group, where a lot of people said, yeah, this is kind of a known issue with these first ones that came out. Supposedly it's a little bit better with the NT Noir, the newer revision of this. But still, again, this thing is a high quality product in every single way except this. And as far as I know, Analogue was not able to fix it with the firmware. They never did a recall. There isn't a little spacer or something that they put out that would fix this problem. It's just incredibly disappointing because, again, in every other way, this product is awesome. And I should be clear, it's not every time. It's just enough to be annoying. And so for that reason alone, it breaks my heart, but that's why it's down this far on my list. Next up is the Hyperkin RetroN 5, and for years, this was my go-to system for doing any kind of emulation, especially here on YouTube. As a matter of fact, this system right here is what really allowed me years ago to step up the quality of gameplay I did for my YouTube channel, because this thing it's rock solid and it supports a ton of systems. So get this, it supports the original Nintendo, the Famicom, the Super Nintendo, Super Famicom. It supports Genesis and also Mega Drive games, as well as Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games. It does a lot, and for the most part, it does it really well. In addition to outputting those games via HDMI, it also has a bunch of options, including the ability to do save states, you can do cheats, you also can do fan-made patches, like translation patches. However, there are two things that kind of bring this console down the list a bit. The first one is the controller. Now, it's great that they include a controller with this because, you know, if this is your only system, you're going to obviously need a controller, and here's one that will work in a pinch. but it's not great. It's not very comfortable. It works okay. The buttons at least work, but my original one died after about a year and a half, something like that. So not very reliable when it comes to the battery. However, it doesn't matter in most cases because what's nice about this system is that you can also use the original controllers with the Super Nintendo or the Genesis, and those work across systems. So you can use a Genesis controller playing Game Boy games if you want, or a Super Nintendo controller playing Genesis games if you want. So the controller issue is kind of annoying, but again, you're probably going to want to use real controllers. And the second issue I want to mention briefly is that there is a bit of controversy and drama around the creation of this device because, and I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on television, so I don't claim to know all the details of it, but basically some of the software that is included on the RetroN 5 was not properly licensed or implemented in a way that goes with the industry requirements of the people who originally created it. Does that make sense? So in other words, they're using third-party software to do some of the emulation, and they didn't supposedly necessarily follow the rules correctly for that. Again, I'm not a lawyer, I don't play one on television, I don't claim to know all the details, but when it comes to the RetroN 5, some people are very passionate about that issue, and that may stop some people from using this. I just want to mention it because it may be important to you. And so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that might be the reason why the Game Boy Advance support in their newer SQ console isn't quite as good as this one, because this console actually came out first and the SQ came out later, and in this one, Game Boy Advance support is just fine. So anyways, just want to mention it in case you care about that stuff. But overall, I really do like the RetroN 5. It's a workhorse. It plays literally thousands of games, and it's great. Now, I mentioned I was going to talk about some prototype devices that I use all the time in my game room, and the first one is this thing called the Atari Man. This is an Atari 2600 clone system that was created by a user over at Atari Age. His name is Chris. He goes by Crispy, and this thing is awesome. So basically what you're seeing here is a homemade FPGA-based Atari 2600 clone system that is housed in this casing that's designed to look like a classic Sony Walkman, and it functions like one too. So what I mean by that is that when you put the cartridge in the end of it there, you actually hit the play button to start the emulation, and it's outputting via HDMI. It supports the classic Atari joysticks, plus the functions that you would use on a real Atari are the other buttons on the Walkman. And then to finish the look, a friend of mine did that custom sticker on the top, again, kind of a throwback to Atari as well as the original Walkman. And this thing works really well. So obviously I have two devices here, the RetroN 77 and this Atari Man Walkman style thing. And I can tell the difference between them because this uses FPGA to recreate the 2600 hardware. And so there is zero lag with this, where with the RetroN 77, because it's using emulation, there's a tiny bit, and you might not notice it, but when you go back and forth, this is the device that I prefer to use, because especially in arcade games, which is what all the Atari games are, you can definitely tell the difference. This thing just runs them that much better. And so it's my understanding that this is kind of a one-off passion project that Chris did just to kind of see if he could pull it off. And then he sent me one for review, and I got to keep it. And I guess at the time, this was a couple years ago, he didn't really think that people would pay the amount of money it would cost to manufacture something like this. And so it's my understanding that he never really went into production with it. Part of me thinks that now, today in 2021, that, hardcore Atari fans might pay for something like this. I think it's actually pretty cool. So yeah, as of right now, I think I am one of the few people that actually has the prototype. But I love it because I'm an Atari 2600 kid and I use it every chance I get in my game room. Moving on to a fan favorite, that is the Analogue Super NT, which is a clone system of the Super Nintendo. So this is where I really don't have that much bad to say about this device. I mean, Analogue just did a fantastic job recreating that classic Nintendo hardware. And for a lot of people, this really is kind of the ultimate Super Nintendo / Super Famicom device because, well, first of all, it's using FPGA to do its recreation of that hardware, which means that the compatibility is pretty much 100%, and it outputs it in glorious 1080p with 0 lag. And like all the other analog devices, there are tons of options that you can play with to your heart's content if you go into the settings. And also, as a nice little bonus, they include Super Turrican, the director's cut, with every device. So even if you don't have any games, you do have this one, which is a kind of unreleased version of that game, kind of as a showcase as to what it can do. And I also think it looks beautiful. Obviously, you see here that I have the crystal clear one, which I'm always a sucker for those transparent ones. But they also had, I believe, 4 colors total. So they had one that kind of looked more like, you know, the US version of the Super Nintendo. They also had a black one, and then they had one that was gray and black. But yeah, it's just a really nice, compact, well thought out, just, I don't know, flawless device. The other clone system and prototype that I want to mention in this list, and it's not quite my number one, and could be a little bit controversial, is the PolyMega. First, I'm going to describe what this is, then we'll get into a little bit of the critique and the drama surrounding the PolyMega. But basically what this is, it's a clone system that is primarily at this point focused on CD-based emulation. Right now I can play my physical PlayStation 1 games, my Sega Saturn games, Sega CD games, TurboGrafx CD, as well as Neo Geo CD games, and it's region free. And it also has support for NES, Super NES, Sega Genesis, 32X, and other systems that are more cartridge based. Although the review unit that I got right here, it has some of those pre-installed games on it, but it doesn't have the module to use those cartridges. So as it sits right here, I primarily just use it again for disc-based games. And it plays them extremely well, especially Sega Saturn, which is a system that has been fairly difficult to emulate in the past. You see all the Sega Saturn games that I've physically put onto the system here, and it works really well. Same with Sega CD and PlayStation 1 games and everything else that I want to get out of it. Plus, I love its interface. It looks cool. It's really easy to navigate. It's fun to explore. I believe there is like 11,000 games in its database, so it knows a lot of games that it supports and give you more information on it, recommendations, things like that. However, there is a bit of confusion and drama surrounding this device, unfortunately. So, you know, like I said, I was sent a review unit back in August along with several other YouTubers, and we were under the impression that these were going to come out in the fall, but sadly that did not happen. Things got pushed back, and then there was refunds, and basically there's just a lot of confusion and, like I said, drama out there. I mean, the truth is, I wish I knew when this is going to come out. I assume it's going to eventually come out, but I reached out to the company to get clarification on that. I told them I was going to be doing this update video, and was there any additional comment or information that they wanted me to give to you, the viewers, and they did not respond by the time I was making this. So I don't know what's going on with this. I know just as much as you guys. And so for now, this continues to be a really cool prototype in my game room that I do use all the time when I play the systems that it supports, or I'm capturing gameplay footage for my YouTube channel. But I do hope that one day this does come out for the people who pre-ordered it, because, like I said, it's almost my favorite clone system in my game room. Almost. Which brings us to my favorite clone system in my game room, and that, of course, is the Analogue Mega SG. And in many ways, I think this is the perfect companion piece to their Super Nintendo version that they made, the Super NT. Both of these systems are very similar. They're very similar in size as well as performance. They're both excellent systems, but what makes this one that much better? Well, it's these adapters. I love what Analogue did here, because they have these crystal clear cartridge adapters that you put into the cartridge slot that let you play a bunch of different Sega systems. So for instance, you can play your Master System games on it, as well as the Game Gear games. You also have support for the Sega My Cards. Those are those like credit card shaped games that primarily you played on the Master System, but I think they used them on other systems as well. You have support for the SG-1000, which I believe is Sega's first gaming console, as well as the SC-3000, which was their computer. So when you factor in the support for obviously the Sega Genesis as well as the Master System, this one console will play probably, what, 1,500 to maybe 2,000 physical games. It's incredible. And like other analog products, this is FPGA based, which means you're going to get the best accuracy with zero lag. And like with the Super NT, they threw in an extra game. This one includes the unreleased Sega Genesis game, Ultra Core. So yeah, I don't really have anything negative to say about the Mega SG. I mean, honestly, I went back and forth between this one and the Super NT. It really just depends on if you want Genesis support or Super Nintendo support. You know, it depends on what games you want to play. But for me, it was all about those adapters. That's such a cool touch. So anyways, guys, this is my ranking of the clone consoles that are in my game room. Now, I know this is not all of them that are available on the market. These are just the ones that I've either picked up or have been sent for review over the last couple years. And I've heard some good things about other companies' products as well. For instance, I think a lot of people have the Retrobit clone consoles, and I even think some of those are FPGA based. So, you know, just be aware that there are other solutions out there. These are just the ones that I happen to have. And I also have to say that I'm very excited for the Analogue Pocket. I was able to pre-order one of those when that came up. It's a bummer that we don't have that yet in our hands, but I guess we're going to be getting that this fall, and I can't wait. And I'd love to know which clone consoles you are rocking in your game room, which ones you like, and which ones you think people should probably stay away from. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.